A mountain man found an Apache woman shivering under a tree and gave her his blanket. The late afternoon sun hung low over the rugged mountain range, casting long golden shadows across the rocky terrain. The wind whispered softly through the pine trees, carrying the crisp scent of earth and moss. A lone mountain man trudged along a narrow trail, his boots crunching over the dry leaves and small stones scattered across the path. His clothes were simple and well-worn, patched in several places, but they offered him the protection he needed in this harsh, untamed wilderness. He had spent most of his life in these mountains, far from towns and settlements, living off the land and moving with the rhythm of nature. He had learned to read the signs of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the tracks in the mud, the distant call of a bird or the snap of a twig underfoot. Everything in this wild world had a meaning if one knew how to see it. And today, as he made his way along the narrow trail, his eyes caught something unusual, something that made him pause mid-step. Under the gnarled branches of a solitary tree, he noticed a small figure huddled against the trunk. At first, he thought it might be an animal, perhaps a deer or a stray dog, seeking shade or warmth. But as he drew closer, he realized it was a person, a woman, curled up in a way that made her appear even smaller than she was. Her shoulders were shaking, and her thin clothing did little to protect her from the cold that had begun to settle in with the fading sunlight. The sight struck him with a mixture of surprise and concern. In all his years wandering these mountains, he had rarely encountered another human, especially one so clearly in need. He approached carefully, taking slow steps so as not to startle her. The woman lifted her head slightly, her eyes wide and wary, as though she were unsure whether he meant harm or kindness. Her dark hair fell loosely around her face, matted from travel and wind, and her skin, bronzed by the sun, looked pale against the cold. She shivered, pulling her arms tightly around herself, as if she could somehow make the chill disappear. The mountain man could see the fear in her eyes, but he also saw something else: resilience, a quiet strength that told him she had survived many hardships already. The man had spent years alone in the mountains, and solitude had taught him many things. He knew that fear could be paralyzing, but kindness had the power to open doors even the most cautious hearts kept closed. With that thought in mind, he spoke softly, his voice gentle and low, careful not to frighten her. "Hey, it's okay. You don't need to be afraid," he said, stepping closer but keeping a respectful distance. The woman didn't respond at first. She merely blinked, her gaze fixed on him, trying to gauge whether he was a threat. He noticed the way her hands clutched at her thin shawl, wringing it as if it could somehow shield her from the cold and from the dangers of the world. He could imagine the long journey she must have endured to end up here, alone and vulnerable under this tree. Without thinking too much, the mountain man reached into his pack and pulled out a heavy wool blanket. It was thick and worn, the kind that had protected him through countless nights in the mountains. He held it out to her, draping it gently over her shoulders. The warmth from the blanket seeped through her clothing, and for the first time since he had seen her, her body relaxed just a little. She shivered less, her fingers loosening their grip on the shawl. For a long moment they simply sat there, silent, the only sounds the whispering wind and the distant calls of birds returning to their nests. He watched her carefully, noting every movement, every subtle change in her expression. She wasn't just cold, she was wary, unsure whether this kindness was genuine. But he knew patience was the key. In the mountains, haste and recklessness often led to mistakes. Careful observation and gentle action kept one alive. He decided to stay near her until she regained some strength. He built a small fire using dry twigs and pine needles, the flames crackling and sending sparks into the cool air. The light warmed the surrounding area, casting a soft glow over the woman's face. She watched the fire with a mixture of curiosity and caution, as if trying to understand this stranger who had appeared so suddenly in her life. He offered her some water from his canteen, and after a moment's hesitation, she accepted it. Her hands trembled slightly as she drank, but she did not turn away. As the sun sank lower, the mountain man spoke again, this time using simple gestures to convey reassurance. He pointed to himself, then to the fire, then to the blanket, and finally made a slow, sweeping motion with his hand, suggesting that she could rest and be safe for the night. She watched him, slowly understanding his intent. The tension in her shoulders eased just a little, and she allowed herself to lean against the tree, wrapped in the warmth of the blanket. The mountain man knew that trust was fragile. One wrong move could undo all he had done, so he spoke softly, continuing to use gestures to communicate, never forcing her to respond. They did not need words for everything. Sometimes shared understanding was enough. The firelight danced across their faces, creating an unspoken connection between them. He could see that she was exhausted, that the cold and fear had taken a toll on her body. He had to make sure she felt safe, at least until morning, when the dangers of the forest might seem less threatening. Hours passed slowly. The night settled over the mountains, wrapping everything in darkness. The wind howled through the trees, but the fire kept them warm and the mountain man stayed near her, a silent guardian in the wilderness. Occasionally, he would toss a small stick into the flames, sending sparks up into the night sky. She watched these sparks, her eyes reflecting the firelight, and for the first time he saw a hint of relief in her expression. The mountain was still vast and untamed, but at least for now, she was not alone. He thought about the many people he had met in passing during his life, traders, travelers, other wanderers, but encounters like this were rare. This woman had appeared suddenly, as if from nowhere, and yet she had stirred something in him that he could not ignore. He had always believed that life in the mountains required self-reliance, that solitude was a necessary shield against the hardships of the world. But seeing her there, shivering and vulnerable, reminded him that kindness was also a form of survival, a way to preserve the human spirit in a world that could be unforgiving. By the time the moon rose high above the peaks, casting silver light over the forest, the woman had fallen into a deep, exhausted sleep. The mountain man stayed awake, keeping watch over the fire and listening to the night sounds. Every rustle, every distant animal call kept him alert, but he did not feel lonely. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he had done the right thing, that he had extended help when it was needed most. In the vast wilderness where danger and uncertainty were constant companions, small acts of compassion could create bonds that were stronger than fear or mistrust. As he watched her sleep, he realized that this encounter would stay with him for a long time. He had rescued her from the immediate danger of the cold, but he had also sparked something more, a fragile connection between two people from very different worlds. The mountains might separate them physically, but for that night at least, they were bound together by trust and shared humanity. And so, in the quiet stillness of the mountain night, with only the fire and the soft rustle of the trees as witnesses, a mountain man and an Apache woman began a story of survival, empathy, and unexpected friendship, one that would leave a lasting mark on both their lives. Morning arrived slowly in the mountains. Pale sunlight filtered through the trees, casting soft patterns on the forest floor. The chill of night still lingered in the air, but the fire from the night before had left a warm glow on the stones and embers that remained. The mountain man stirred, stretching his arms and legs. He glanced at the woman sleeping under the tree, wrapped in the heavy wool blanket he had given her. She looked peaceful, no longer shivering, and for a moment he allowed himself a sense of relief. He had spent countless mornings in the wilderness, waking to bird song and the rustle of leaves, but this morning felt different. It was quieter, yet alive in a way that reminded him that life was not only about survival. There were moments of beauty, and sometimes there were connections with others that made the hardships more meaningful. He gently nudged the blanket closer around the woman's shoulders and watched as her breathing deepened in sleep. He decided to stay close until she fully woke. Survival in the mountains required caution, and he could not risk leaving her alone, even for a short time. The forest was full of hidden dangers, wild animals, sudden drops, and unexpected weather changes. But there was also beauty. The way sunlight touched the tips of pine needles, the song of a distant creek, and the patterns of moss and lichen on the trees. He wanted her to see this too, but only when she was ready, when she was strong enough to face it. After some time, she stirred, opened slowly, blinking against the soft morning light. At first, she looked around in confusion, unsure of where she was. Her hand moved instinctively to the blanket, clutching it as if it were a shield. When she saw him sitting a few feet away, her eyes widened, and she instinctively pulled herself closer under the tree. The mountain man spoke softly, using calm gestures to show he meant no harm. He pointed to the fire, then to the blanket, and finally to a small patch of bread and dried meat he had set nearby. Slowly, she understood his intent. Hesitating only a moment, she reached out and took the food. Her hands shook slightly, but she ate, and the mountain man waited patiently, letting her regain her strength. As she ate, he watched her carefully, noticing every detail. Her hands were rough and calloused, showing a life of hard work. Her face carried a quiet strength, a hint that she had faced many challenges before. The sun slowly rose higher, warming the air and melting some of the chill that had gripped the forest overnight. He could see that her body relaxed further as the warmth spread through her and her breathing became steadier. Once she had eaten, he gestured toward the surrounding forest, pointing to a nearby stream where fresh water flowed. With a hesitant step, she followed him, and he guided her to the cool, clear water. She bent down and drank, cupping her hands while he watched carefully to make sure she did not strain herself. The water reflected the morning sun, sparkling like tiny diamonds, and for a moment the woman paused, as if seeing something beautiful for the first time in a long while. After drinking, they returned to the fire. He gestured toward the blanket again, and she wrapped it around herself once more. The mountain man could see that she wanted to speak but struggled to find the words. He smiled gently and shook his head, indicating that words were not necessary. Communication could take many forms, he knew. Sometimes shared experiences, gestures, and understanding glances said more than speech ever could. He decided it was time to start moving. The mountains were not forgiving, and they could not stay in one place for too long. He extended his hand toward her, a simple gesture of guidance and protection. She hesitated, then slowly took it. Together, they began to walk along a narrow trail, winding through trees and over rocks, the mountain man leading while keeping a careful watch on her. The journey was slow. He did not rush, understanding that she was weak from her journey and the cold of the previous night. He pointed out safe paths, areas where the rocks were stable, and spots where they could rest. She watched him closely, learning quickly, and gradually began to trust his guidance. Her steps became surer, and she no longer shivered, at least not from the cold. As they walked, the mountain man shared simple gestures and small objects he carried: a piece of dried fruit, a clean cloth, a small knife. Each item he offered, he showed her how to use, demonstrating patience and care. She watched intently, her curiosity overcoming her initial caution. By noon, they reached a small clearing where sunlight poured down, warming the earth and revealing patches of soft grass. He gestured for her to rest, and she lay down for a short while, the blanket pulled snug around her. During this brief pause, he looked at the woman and noticed something remarkable. Despite her initial fear and exhaustion, her eyes held determination. She had survived the cold night, the long journey, and the uncertainty of meeting a stranger, and now she faced the forest with quiet courage. The mountain man realized that this encounter was not just about helping her survive. It was about recognizing her strength and resilience. After resting, they continued their journey. He led her toward higher ground, where the forest thinned and the trail became less treacherous. Along the way, they encountered signs of wildlife: tracks of deer and rabbits, the distant call of birds, and the rustling of leaves as squirrels moved through the trees. He pointed these out to her, showing her how to read the forest. She watched carefully, absorbing every detail, learning how to observe the world around her with awareness and caution. The afternoon passed quickly, and the sun began to dip toward the horizon. They found another safe spot to stop, a small rise with a view of the valley below. Here, the mountain man built another small fire, and they sat together, the woman wrapped in the blanket once more. This time, she began to speak in broken phrases, telling him small pieces of her story. She spoke of her home, her family, and the long journey that had brought her to the mountains. He listened carefully, nodding and using gestures to show he understood. Though their words were limited, a bond began to form. She began to trust him more, and he felt a sense of responsibility and care for her. The mountains could be dangerous, but together they were stronger. The fire crackled between them, and the quiet of the forest created a sense of intimacy and safety. For the first time in a long while, the woman felt a moment of peace, and the mountain man felt the warmth of shared humanity. As night fell, they prepared to rest again. The mountain man arranged the blanket around her, making sure she would stay warm through the night. He built the fire carefully, ensuring it would last as long as possible and provide light and protection. She watched him with quiet appreciation, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and growing trust. Before sleep took them, the mountain man looked up at the stars scattered across the dark sky like tiny points of light. He thought about how vast the world was, and yet how small and meaningful a single act of kindness could be. He realized that helping this woman survive was not just a duty, but a moment that would stay with him forever. The mountains were full of challenges, but they were also full of opportunities for compassion, understanding, and connection. That night, as the fire burned low and the wind whispered through the trees, the woman slept peacefully under the blanket he had given her. For the mountain man, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he had made a difference. Their journey was just beginning, and the path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, both of them felt a sense of hope. In the silence of the mountains, under the watchful eyes of the stars, the two strangers, one a solitary mountain man, the other a weary traveler from a distant home, shared a simple, unspoken understanding. They had found trust, warmth, and companionship in a world that could often be cold and unforgiving. And for now, that was enough. The next morning arrived with a gentle golden light filtering through the trees. The air was crisp but carried the scent of damp earth and pine, reminding both of them that the mountains could be beautiful yet harsh. The mountain man stirred first, as he often did, careful not to wake the woman too suddenly. She had slept more deeply than he expected, the blanket and the warmth of the fire offering her comfort through the night. Now, as the sun slowly climbed higher, he quietly built a small fire to chase away the morning chill. The woman stirred shortly after, blinking her eyes against the rising sunlight. She sat up slowly, her movements deliberate, careful not to upset her fragile balance after the long journey. She looked around, taking in the forest with fresh eyes. The shadows of the trees had shifted, and the mountain that had seemed imposing the night before now appeared welcoming, though still untamed. She adjusted the blanket around her shoulders and looked at the man, who nodded reassuringly. His calm demeanor encouraged her to feel safe, though a trace of caution remained in her eyes. Once she had regained her strength, he gestured toward the small fire and then toward the sparse collection of supplies he carried. He showed her how to prepare a simple breakfast, some dried meat, a small piece of bread, and water from his canteen. She watched intently, then mimicked his actions carefully. Though she struggled at first, her determination became evident as she learned quickly. With each small task completed, her confidence grew. The mountain man watched silently, impressed by her resilience. After their breakfast, he gestured that it was time to move. She rose, wrapping the blanket tightly around herself, and followed him along the narrow trail. He moved with careful steps, scanning the forest ahead and behind for signs of danger. She kept close, her eyes learning to read the subtle cues of the wilderness, the movement of leaves, the sound of distant wildlife, the shape of the terrain. Each step strengthened her understanding of the mountain world, and he encouraged her with small gestures, a nod, or a gentle smile. As they continued, he showed her how to recognize different signs in the forest. He pointed out tracks in the soil, explaining through gestures that they indicated the presence of deer or smaller animals. She listened carefully, nodding and studying each mark with keen attention. At times, he would stop and crouch, picking up a fallen leaf or a pine cone, showing her its features and how to use them. The woman's eyes lit up with curiosity, and for a moment the hardships of her journey seemed to fade into fascination. The mountain man also taught her how to move quietly through the forest. He demonstrated how to step lightly over dry leaves, avoiding snapping twigs, and how to keep her breathing calm so as not to alert nearby animals. She tried to follow, at first stumbling slightly, but quickly improved. The two of them moved like shadows through the trees, careful, alert, and in harmony with the wilderness around them. As the sun reached its peak, they paused near a clear, bubbling stream. The mountain man gestured for her to drink and wash her hands. She knelt beside the water, cupping it carefully in her hands, and took slow sips. The cool water revived her, and she splashed a little on her face, smiling as the sensation refreshed her. He watched her closely, ensuring she was safe and teaching her how to handle the stream without slipping on the wet stones. The moment was simple but profound, a shared experience that strengthened their bond. After their brief rest, he pointed toward the mountains in the distance, indicating that they needed to continue moving. The woman followed, her steps more confident than before. As they climbed higher, the trail became rougher, the rocks more jagged, and the incline steeper. The mountain man moved carefully, holding out his hand at times to steady her. She accepted his guidance, her trust in him growing with each step. The physical challenge demanded focus and cooperation, and together they navigated the difficult terrain. During the climb, he showed her how to use natural markers to find their way. He pointed out unusual trees, distinctive rocks, and patterns in the land that could serve as guides. She memorized these details carefully, realizing that learning to read the mountains was essential for survival. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the landscape, and the air cooled, reminding them both of the approaching evening. As they reached a small plateau overlooking a valley below, the mountain man gestured for them to rest. They sat side by side, wrapped in blankets, watching the vast expanse of forest, streams, and distant mountains. The woman spoke softly for the first time since the morning, using broken words to tell him fragments of her life. She described her home, the family she had left behind, and the long, difficult journey she had undertaken. Though her words were few, the mountain man listened patiently, nodding and using gestures to show he understood. Through these small exchanges, they shared more than survival skills. They shared stories, experiences, and fragments of their past lives. The mountain man spoke sparingly, mostly using gestures and occasional words, but each action was filled with meaning. He pointed to a bird in the distance, then mimicked its flight, conveying the beauty of nature. She watched, captivated, beginning to see the mountains not only as a place of danger but as a place of life, learning, and wonder. Evening approached, and the air turned colder. The mountain man built a small fire for warmth, carefully arranging the stones and wood to keep the flames steady. The woman sat close, wrapped tightly in her blanket, watching the fire with fascination. The flames danced, and sparks drifted upward, disappearing into the darkening sky. It was a quiet moment of peace, a brief respite from the struggles of the journey. As darkness fell, the mountain man gestured that it was time to prepare for the night. He showed her how to lay a safe sleeping area near the fire, using rocks to block the wind and keep the warmth contained. She followed his guidance carefully, her hands moving with newfound skill. By now, she had begun to understand not only the practical aspects of surviving in the mountains, but also the deeper lessons of trust, patience, and observation. Before settling to rest, the mountain man looked at the woman with a sense of admiration. She had grown stronger in such a short time, and her determination inspired him. Though their lives had been very different, this shared journey had created a connection that went beyond words. The fire flickered between them, illuminating their faces, and the quiet of the forest felt comforting rather than intimidating. As they prepared to sleep, he gestured toward the stars above, pointing out constellations and the movement of the night sky. She watched in wonder, her eyes reflecting the starlight. For a brief moment, the harshness of the mountains felt distant, replaced by a sense of awe and curiosity. The simple act of sharing knowledge, of teaching her to observe and appreciate the world around them, created a bond that went deeper than survival. That night, wrapped in the heavy blanket and warmed by the fire, the woman felt a sense of security she had not known for a long time. She realized that the mountain man's kindness was not just about helping her survive. It was about giving her confidence, hope, and the understanding that she was not entirely alone. The mountain man, in turn, found satisfaction in guiding her, seeing her grow stronger, and knowing that his actions could make a real difference in someone else's life. They fell asleep side by side, the fire's glow casting soft shadows around them. The sounds of the forest filled the night, leaves rustling in the wind, distant animal calls, and the gentle flow of a nearby stream. In the quiet, they shared an unspoken understanding. Trust, patience, and compassion could flourish even in the most challenging circumstances. And so, as the night deepened and the stars shone brightly above the mountains, the journey continued. Each day brought new challenges, lessons, and discoveries, but also moments of beauty, connection, and hope. The mountain man and the woman from a distant home had begun to share not only the path through the wilderness, but also a journey of understanding, friendship, and respect. Their story, though still unfolding, had already taken root, in the quiet strength of two people learning to survive together. The morning sun rose slowly, casting warm, golden light over the mountains. The air was crisp, but not as cold as the nights had been. The mountain man and the woman awoke to the sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. The woman stretched, her muscles sore from climbing and walking the previous day, but her movements were stronger than before. She had learned quickly, gaining both skill and confidence under the mountain man's patient guidance. He stirred as well, quietly building a small fire for warmth. The crackle of the flames brought comfort to both of them, a reminder that they were safe, at least for the moment. As the woman sipped water from her hands and nibbled on some dried fruit, he watched carefully. He knew the mountains could be unforgiving, and every small action mattered. Even as her confidence grew, he needed to ensure she did not exhaust herself before they reached safer ground. After breakfast, they set out again. The mountain trail grew steeper and more treacherous as they climbed. Loose rocks shifted underfoot, and the uneven ground demanded careful attention. The mountain man held out his hand when necessary, steadying her as she navigated the dangerous terrain. At times he would point to safer paths, avoiding hidden drops or patches of slippery moss. She followed closely, her trust in him evident with every careful step she took. Despite the beauty of the mountains, danger was never far. Small animals scurried through the trees, and the distant call of predators reminded them that they were not alone. The mountain man had taught her how to recognize signs of larger animals, such as paw prints, broken branches, and disturbed earth. She listened intently, learning quickly, aware that the forest was both home and challenge. As the day progressed, clouds began to gather overhead. The sky darkened, signaling that rain or perhaps even a storm might be approaching. The mountain man recognized the signs immediately: the smell of wet earth, the heavy stillness in the air, and the distant rumble of wind over the peaks. He gestured to her, pointing to the clouds and then to the trail ahead, indicating that they needed to find shelter quickly. She nodded, understanding without words, and together they quickened their pace, moving with purpose but remaining careful not to slip or fall. They came upon a small cave nestled into the side of a rocky cliff. The entrance was partially hidden by overhanging branches and moss, providing natural shelter from the impending rain. The mountain man gestured for her to enter first, showing respect and care. She hesitated for a moment but then stepped inside, finding the cave dry and surprisingly spacious. He followed, bringing in their small bundle of supplies and tending the fire to ensure it stayed warm and protected from the wind. Inside the cave, they sat together in relative safety. The rain began to fall outside, soft at first, then in heavier sheets that pounded against the rocks and trees. The woman watched the storm, her eyes wide. But the fear that had been so evident days before had faded. She felt protected and safe in the presence of the mountain man who had guided her through every challenge so far. He handed her some dried fruit and water, gestures of care that reassured her. As the storm raged, the mountain man decided to use the time to teach her more about the wilderness. He showed her how to recognize edible plants, how to move quietly without disturbing the environment, and how to observe the signs of animals nearby. She listened carefully, absorbing every lesson. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and determination, and he felt a deep admiration for her resilience. While they sat in the cave, the woman began to speak more freely. Her broken words formed fragments of stories, tales of her family, of her home, and of the journey that had brought her to the mountains. She spoke of hardships and challenges, but also of moments of beauty she had witnessed along the way. The mountain man listened patiently, nodding, and occasionally using gestures to encourage her. Though he did not speak much, his presence provided a sense of stability and understanding that words alone could not convey. The storm lasted for several hours, giving them time to rest and reflect. They shared small tasks, arranging the firewood, collecting rainwater in makeshift containers, and keeping the cave clean. These simple activities created a rhythm and routine, helping the woman feel a sense of normalcy despite being far from home. She began to understand the ways of the wilderness, gaining skills that would serve her long after this journey was over. As the afternoon wore on, the rain began to ease, leaving a soft mist in the forest. The mountain man gestured that it was time to continue. She hesitated for a moment, looking outside at the wet and slippery ground, but then nodded. Together, they stepped out of the cave and resumed their journey. The forest smelled fresh, washed clean by the rain, and sunlight began to break through the clouds, casting sparkling light on the leaves and rocks. The trail ahead was more challenging than before. The mountain man led the way, choosing paths that were stable but still required attention. She followed, her steps cautious but confident. Occasionally they encountered obstacles, a fallen tree, a muddy slope, or a steep incline. But with guidance and patience, they navigated each challenge. Her confidence grew with each success, and the mountain man encouraged her with small nods, smiles, and gestures of praise. As the sun began to set, they found a small clearing near a gentle stream. The man built a fire, and she wrapped herself in the blanket, warmed not just by the flames but also by the growing trust between them. They ate a simple meal, sharing what little supplies they carried, and talked in small, careful ways. The woman's voice was more confident now, and she began to ask questions, pointing to different plants, animals, and natural signs she noticed along the trail. The mountain man answered with gestures, demonstrations, and occasional words, teaching her the names and uses of each discovery. Night fell, and the forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. The mountain man kept watch by the fire, ensuring it remained steady. The woman slept nearby, feeling safe and cared for in a way she had not felt in many days. For him, it was a quiet satisfaction to see her thriving, learning, and gaining strength. Each challenge they faced together strengthened the bond between them, creating a partnership rooted in trust and respect. As they rested, the mountain man reflected on the journey so far. He had encountered many challenges in the wilderness, but guiding the woman had changed his perspective. It was no longer only about survival. It was about connection, understanding, and shared experience. The mountains had tested them, but they had also given them a chance to grow, to learn, and to help one another. Throughout the night he remained alert, listening to the forest, watching the fire, and ensuring the woman remained safe. The wind whispered through the trees, and the faint glow of the moon illuminated the forest floor. He thought about the days ahead, knowing that the journey would not be easy, but confident that together they could face whatever came. By morning, they would continue, strengthened by the lessons of survival, trust, and companionship learned during the storm. The mountain had tested them, but it had also revealed the resilience and courage within them both. The woman had grown stronger, more confident, and more skilled in navigating the wilderness, while the mountain man had discovered the profound impact of kindness and shared humanity. And so, as the fire burned low and the night settled around the forest, they rested side by side, ready to face the challenges that the next day would bring. The journey through the mountains continued, not only as a test of endurance, but as a story of trust, learning, and the unspoken bond between two people brought together by circumstance, courage, and compassion. The next morning, the mountains were quiet, the sun peeking gently over the peaks, casting warm light on the rugged landscape. The air was fresh and filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, a reminder that the forest had survived the storm of the previous day. The mountain man and the woman awoke, feeling rested and ready for the final leg of their journey. Though the path ahead was uncertain, both of them carried a sense of quiet determination. The mountain man began to gather the firewood, careful to leave the small clearing as it was, respecting the forest that had sheltered them. The woman helped, her movements now confident and assured. She had learned so much over the past days: how to walk carefully on rough terrain, how to read the signs of animals and the weather, and how to care for herself in the wilderness. Each skill she had gained had strengthened her, and now she moved with a grace and awareness that spoke of resilience and courage. After a simple breakfast of bread, dried meat, and water, the man gestured toward the trail ahead. He pointed to the distant hills and valleys, showing her the path that would lead to a safer area. The woman nodded, understanding without hesitation. She had come to trust him completely, not just for guidance, but because he had shown her patience, kindness, and respect. She no longer needed to rely solely on instinct. She could walk confidently, knowing she had both skill and support. They moved carefully along the trail, the morning sun warming their backs and casting long shadows before them. The mountain man led the way, watching for unstable rocks, hidden roots, and slippery patches of moss. The woman followed closely, her eyes alert, noting every detail he pointed out. Occasionally, she would mimic his gestures, pointing to a unique tree, a distant bird, or a small animal, showing that she was learning to read the forest as he did. As they traveled, they came across signs of other people, footprints in the mud, remnants of small campsites, and even the faint smell of smoke from a distant fire. The woman paused, glancing at the mountain man with a mix of curiosity and caution. He nodded reassuringly, showing that these signs did not necessarily mean danger. They could be other travelers or local villagers, people who also depended on the mountains for survival. Her eyes reflected a mix of excitement and wariness. The world beyond their immediate path was vast and full of unknowns. By midday, they reached a small stream, clear and cool, running over smooth stones and mossy banks. The mountain man gestured for her to drink and wash her face. She knelt by the water, cupping it in her hands and letting it refresh her. The stream sparkled in the sunlight, and for a moment she paused to enjoy the simple beauty of the moment. He watched quietly, feeling a sense of pride and satisfaction. She had grown so much in such a short time, learning not just to survive but to appreciate the small wonders of the wilderness. After their brief rest, they continued their journey, moving steadily through the forest. The trail grew steeper in places, but the woman handled it with confidence. When they reached a rocky incline, the mountain man offered his hand. She took it without hesitation, and together they climbed carefully, each step requiring focus and cooperation. The challenges of the terrain no longer felt overwhelming. Instead, they were opportunities to test their skills and deepen their bond. By late afternoon, they emerged from the dense forest onto a high plateau overlooking a wide valley. Below, they could see fields, small huts, and the smoke rising from chimneys. It was clear that people lived there, a community that could provide safety and shelter. The woman's eyes lit up with hope and relief. She looked at the mountain man, and for the first time, her gratitude found its way into words. Thank you, she said softly, her voice steady and sincere. He nodded, acknowledging her thanks with a quiet smile. They began the descent toward the valley, carefully, navigating narrow paths and loose stones. The mountain man kept a watchful eye on her, guiding her through the trickier sections and offering encouragement. She moved with increasing confidence, her steps sure and deliberate. Each challenge they overcame together strengthened not only her skills, but also the trust between them. It was no longer a journey of survival alone. It had become a shared adventure, filled with learning, care, and mutual respect. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, casting golden light across the valley, they reached the outskirts of the small settlement. Villagers paused to look at the newcomers, curious, but not alarmed. The woman glanced around, seeing signs of life, families, and children playing near the huts. For a moment she hesitated, unsure how to approach. The mountain man offered a reassuring gesture, indicating that they were safe. Together they walked into the settlement, careful but steady, blending into the life of the community around them. The woman was welcomed by the villagers, who offered food, water, and warmth. She looked back at the mountain man, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, a recognition that he had guided her not just through the mountains, but through fear, uncertainty, and hardship. She no longer felt alone. He had given her more than guidance. He had given her confidence, safety, and the knowledge that kindness could exist even in the harshest conditions. After ensuring she was settled, the mountain man prepared to leave. Their journey together had come to its natural conclusion. He had shared his knowledge, protected her through dangers, and helped her find safety. Now it was time for them to part ways. The woman approached him, wrapping the blanket more tightly around herself, and held out her hands in thanks. He grasped them gently, feeling the warmth of her gratitude. Words were unnecessary. The bond they had formed transcended speech. Before he turned to leave, the woman gave him a small, determined nod. It was a silent acknowledgement of the shared journey, the lessons learned, and the trust they had built. The mountain man nodded in return, his heart full with the satisfaction of knowing that his actions had made a real difference. He watched her blend into the life of the settlement, confident that she would thrive in safety and community. As he began the long walk back into the wilderness, he reflected on the journey they had shared. The mountains had been harsh and unforgiving, yet they had also revealed the best qualities in both of them: courage, patience, determination, and compassion. He realized that acts of kindness, even small ones, could create lasting impact. A simple gesture, like giving a blanket, could transform fear into hope, loneliness into connection, and uncertainty into confidence. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the rugged terrain. The mountain man continued his solitary walk, the forest around him quiet but alive with the sounds of nature. Birds called to each other, leaves rustled in the wind, and the distant peaks glowed softly in the fading light. He felt a sense of peace. Though he returned to solitude, the memory of the woman and their shared journey would remain with him forever, a reminder that even in the most remote and challenging places, kindness and courage could create profound and lasting bonds. That night, as he settled near a quiet stream to rest, he thought about the lessons he had learned. Life in the mountains was difficult, full of danger and uncertainty, but it was also rich with opportunity for compassion, connection, and understanding. The woman's courage, resilience, and willingness to trust had left a deep impression on him. Their shared journey had not only helped her survive, but had also reminded him of the importance of human connection, even in a world where isolation often seemed necessary. The mountain man drifted to sleep under the stars, the fire crackling gently beside him. He dreamt of the woman walking safely among her people, her confidence and hope restored. In his dreams, he saw the mountains not as a place of hardship alone, but as a living world full of challenges, beauty, and opportunities for kindness. The lessons of the journey, the careful steps, the shared trust, the moments of patience and understanding, would guide him in every step he took from that day forward. In the days and weeks that followed, the memory of the woman remained with him,